Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are taking on a massive one. It's one of the biggest financial decisions of our lives. I mean, we've all heard the classic line, right? Renting is just throwing money away. You're basically paying someone else's mortgage. But is that actually true? Well, in this explainer, we're going to totally bypass the conventional wisdom and dig into the real raw math behind renting versus buying. We're going to set up an $80,000 dilemma and literally follow it over a 20-year financial race. We'll be tracking everything, every single rent increase, every unexpected broken water heater, and every dollar invested in the stock market.
Okay, let's dive right into this. To genuinely figure out if renting is just tossing your hard-earned cash into a black hole, we have to strip away all the emotions and look at the hard data. And to do exactly that, we're going to look at two completely identical people and follow their financial journeys over the next 2 decades. So, meet Ryan and Steve. They're both 32 years old, they live in the exact same mid-sized American city, earn exactly $80,000 a year, and by making some seriously responsible financial choices, they have both managed to save up exactly $80,000. Financially speaking, they are carbon copies of each other. But personality-wise, oh, they couldn't be more different. See, Ryan loves stability. He wants the backyard, a garage, that sense of permanence. Steve, on the flip side, values flexibility above all else. The idea of committing to a single address for the next 30 years absolutely terrifies him. He just wants the freedom to pack up and move whenever he feels like it. Naturally, these personalities are going to lead them down completely different financial paths.
Let's look at Ryan first. Ryan decides it's time to put down roots. He finds a really nice 3-bedroom home for $350,000. Now, he puts exactly 20% down, which comes out to $70,000. But as anyone who has bought a house knows, the down payment isn't the only cost to get the keys, right? There are lender fees, title fees, inspections, prepaid taxes, the whole shebang. These closing costs often run around 2 to 5% of the purchase price. So for Ryan, let's just call it $10,000. That means before he even moves a single box into his new living room, his entire life savings, all $80,000, is completely gone, poof, locked up in this property. Now let's look at the day-to-day reality in month 1. Ryan takes out a 30-year fixed mortgage at 7%. So he owes his mortgage, plus all those hidden monthly passengers like property taxes, insurance, and maintenance. That brings his total monthly housing cost to over $2,600. Steve, meanwhile, decides to rent a highly comparable home in the exact same neighborhood for just $2,000 a month. No taxes, no insurance, no maintenance worries, none of it. That leaves Steve with an extra $653 every single month. And here is the real game changer. Instead of spending that cash on, say, a trip to Thailand, Steve does something incredibly important. He takes his unused $80,000 savings, plus that extra $653 a month, and puts it straight into a broad stock market index fund.
So, the crucial point we need to look at is this. Out of Ryan's massive monthly payment of over $2,600, how much of that is actually going toward paying down his loan and building his wealth in that very first month? Prepare yourself, it's a shockingly low $230.
Yeah, let's break that down because this totally shatters the biggest myth of homeownership. People absolutely love to tell renters like Steve that they're throwing $2,000 away. But just look at the breakdown of Ryan's payment. In month 1, he pays over $1,600 in mortgage interest alone, $350 in taxes, $150 in insurance, and sets aside nearly $300 for maintenance. You guys, all of those are unrecoverable costs. Calling rent throwing money away while pretending mortgage interest and roof repairs are somehow investments is, well, it's just creative accounting. The reality is, for the first few years, Ryan's mortgage builds equity painfully slowly. Fast forward to year 3, Ryan has officially experienced the real joys of homeownership. Specifically, his water heater broke. After a totally failed attempt at fixing it via YouTube, he had to pay a professional a few $100 to sort it out. But hey, his home has appreciated nicely at around 3 to 4% per year. Because of this appreciation and his slow principal paydown, Ryan now has around $112,000 to $123,000 in home equity, and that is real wealth. But look at Steve. He's been paying rent, sure, but his original $80,000, plus those monthly investments, have been compounding at an average of 10% annually in the stock market. His liquid portfolio is now worth roughly $130,000. So, after 3 years, this race is incredibly tight. And this brilliantly illustrates the major downside of Steve's strategy, the creeping cost of rent. See, while Ryan's principal and interest payment is locked in forever, Steve's landlord is apparently a big believer in compound growth too. His rent goes up by roughly 3% every single year, so 2,000 becomes 2,122, then eventually pushes toward 2,700, and it just keeps climbing. As time goes on, that monthly savings advantage Steve started with begins to completely evaporate. Time is officially working in Ryan's favor.
But wait, why is Steve still staying so competitive in this wealth race, despite his rising rent? Well, it comes down to one of the absolutely most powerful concepts in finance: opportunity cost. Simply put, it's the potential loss from a missed opportunity. Ryan tied up his entire $80,000 in a house. It's growing through home appreciation, sure. But Steve kept his $80,000 completely liquid and highly invested in the stock market for decades. The compounding growth on that initial massive seed money is Steve's secret weapon. Any honest financial comparison absolutely has to account for it.
Let's check in at the decade mark. Our guys are now 42 years old. Ryan walks around his property with the confidence of a man who owns about half of every brick. He has up to $278,000 in home equity, and his base mortgage payment is still beautifully fixed at $1,863. Steve, meanwhile, through the absolute magic of compounding interest, has a massive investment portfolio worth around $290,000. He's actually ahead in liquid assets. But we've reached a major pivot point here. Steve's rent, after 10 years of steady increases, is now approaching $2,700 a month. It has vastly surpassed Ryan's fixed mortgage payment. And this sets the stage beautifully for our climax, the 20-year showdown. Ryan and Steve are now 52 years old. They've been on these completely separate paths for 2 full decades. So, who made the smarter financial choice? The homeowner or the renter? Now, what's really interesting about this is the final tally. Ryan has built incredible wealth. His home is worth significantly more, and his mortgage balance is pretty tiny at this point. He has up to roughly $661,000 in home equity. That's amazing. But look at Steve. His original $80,000 plus all the extra money he invested during the early years when renting was cheaper, compounded over 20 years at 10%, is now worth roughly $750,000. Honestly, on pure mathematical net worth, Steve the renter actually comes out ahead. But before you swear off buying a house forever, there is a massive glowing red caveat to Steve's victory here. As our source material perfectly notes, the spreadsheet assumes discipline. Human beings often have other plans. Steve's entire win is built on the strict condition that he flawlessly invested the difference every single month. When the market crashed 30%, he invested. When the financial news was panicking, he invested. He never bought a nicer car, he didn't upgrade his lifestyle, he just kept buying index funds like clockwork. And this brings us right into behavioral economics. Because let's face it, humans are generally terrible at delayed gratification. Buying a home works so well for so many people because a mortgage is essentially an automated, forced savings mechanism. Ryan doesn't have to wake up and consciously decide to build equity. The bank simply demands it every single month, no questions asked. Renting to build wealth, exactly like Steve did, requires an extreme, almost superhuman level of unwavering discipline. If you rent for 20 years and just spend the extra cash you save on a nicer lifestyle, well, the renter's advantage completely disappears. Of course, buying isn't perfect either. It comes with some very real hidden risks and trade-offs. First, buying demands time. You usually need to stay put for 7 to 10 years just to break even on those massive transaction costs we talked about earlier. It also severely limits your mobility. Think about it. If Ryan gets a dream job offer across the country, selling a house is a stressful, expensive ordeal. Whereas Steve, he just packs a bag and breaks a lease. Then there's concentration risk. Steve owns a tiny piece of thousands of global companies. Ryan's wealth is entirely tied to the economic health of one single street in one single city. And finally, don't forget about liquidity. If Ryan needs 20 grand in an emergency, he has to go take out a loan against his house. You can't just sell 8% of your kitchen to pay for a medical bill, right? So how do you decide what actually makes sense for your local market right now? Well, here is a fantastic, highly practical tool for your own life: the price-to-rent ratio. It's super simple. You take the purchase price of the home you want, and you divide it by the annual rent of a comparable property. In our example, a $350,000 home divided by $24,000 in annual rent gives us a ratio of about 14.6. As a general rule of thumb, as this ratio climbs, especially when it gets above 20, renting generally becomes the much more mathematically sound and competitive decision. So let's look at the final verdict. The reality is neither choice is automatically smart, and neither is automatically stupid. It is entirely about understanding your personal trade-offs. You should really look to buy if you know for a fact you're staying put for at least 7 to 10 years. You deeply value stability and control over your living space, and the home prices in your area are reasonable relative to the rent.
On the other hand, you should lean toward renting if you value extreme flexibility, you live in an area with highly inflated home prices, and, most importantly, you will genuinely actually invest the monthly savings into the market. At the end of the day, both renters and buyers are paying for housing. Renters pay a landlord, and homeowners pay interest, taxes, insurance, and maintenance. Home ownership can absolutely build enormous wealth, for sure. But it's also an expensive, illiquid asset with a roof that might occasionally ask you for $12,000. The difference between Ryan and Steve didn't just come down to who bought and who rented. It came down to what they did after they made their decision. So, thinking about your own $80,000 dilemma and your own level of financial discipline, what does this all mean for you? Which path are you on right now? Are you buying? Are you renting? Or are you just waiting? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this gives you a whole new lens to look at your housing decisions.